There was a man who lost everything in a single night, not gradually, not slowly, with warning signs that a wiser man might have read. In one stroke, the way lightning strikes a tree, his business was gone, his income was gone, and every dollar he had accumulated through years of labor had been stripped from him as cleanly as though it had never existed. He sat in the wreckage of what had been his life and asked himself a question he had never thought to ask before. Not, how do I rebuild? Not yet. First he asked, what was I actually building toward? He could not answer. And in that silence, in the most painful week of his life, something began. That man went on to spend 20 years studying the habits of 500 of the wealthiest and most accomplished men this world has known. He went on to write the philosophy of personal achievement, upon which more fortunes have been built than I could name in an hour. The week that destroyed him was the week that directed him, because for the first time the noise of false ambition had been silenced, and beneath it he heard, very faintly, the voice of something definite. I tell you this not to comfort you in your present circumstances, whatever they may be, but to establish one truth before we begin. A single week, used with definiteness of purpose and deliberate action, can redirect the entire course of a man's life, not because the week is magical, not because the calendar possesses some power that the calendar before it did not, but because the laws that govern achievement do not require years to respond. They require only decision. 7 days, 7 laws, 7 actions. Let us begin. Part 1 day, 1 stop drifting. Choose a definite chief aim. I have studied, over the course of my life's work, more than 16,000 men and women analyze their habits, their methods, their beliefs, their failures, and their triumphs. And I will tell you what the most devastating discovery of that analysis revealed. 95 of every 100 men alive are going nowhere. Not because they lack ability, not because life has dealt them an unusually cruel hand, but because they have never, not once, with any seriousness, sat down and decided where they were going. They drift from position to position, from year to year, from excuse to excuse, moved not by a definite purpose, but by whatever current of circumstance happens to push them on a given morning. They are not living their lives. They are passengers in them. Nature has a word for this condition. I have spent years studying the law by which nature responds to the drifter, and I will describe it to you in the plainest terms I know. Nature observes what dominates the mind of a man. Whatever he repeats in thought, in word, in action, whatever vibration he sends out most persistently, nature receives that signal, and through a law as reliable as the law of gravity, makes it permanent. The drifter sends out the signal of aimlessness, and nature, faithful to her own laws, hardens aimlessness into the permanent condition of his life. I knew a man, a department manager in a large factory, who had spent 10 years in a position of reasonable comfort. He was not a fool. He was not without talent, but somewhere between his 35th and 50th year, he had made a quiet and catastrophic decision, the decision to be comfortable. He told me himself what happened. He said, I had reached the age in life when a man likes to be comfortable, and having been with the company a long time, I felt I could safely settle back into an easy berth. And so he did. He settled. And the settling took place not in his chair, but in his mind. And once a thing settles in the mind and is left undisturbed long enough, nature makes it permanent. He began to forget meetings. His correspondence piled up. Younger men who had fixed in their minds a definite object toward which to rise began to sharpen past him. He sat at his desk with his mind wandering. He could feel himself slipping, could feel it, and could not name the cause. He finally took a week away from his work and went to a mountain resort, determined either to resign or to find the trouble and remedy it. A few days of honest examination showed him the answer. He was suffering from a plain case of mind wandering. He had no aim. He had abandoned his aim, traded it for comfort, and nature had done exactly what she always does with an abandoned aim. She had handed the space over to drift. He did not resign. Instead, he took out paper and pencil and wrote out a schedule. He imposed upon himself a definite plan for each working day. He chose in writing the most important tasks, and he committed to performing the most distasteful duties first, the very tasks a drifting man always postpones. And he returned to his work with one thing he had not possessed when he left: a definite chief aim. The transformation was not immediate, but it was certain, because it could not be otherwise. Once a man plants a definite aim in his mind, holds it there daily, repeats it aloud, and backs it with concentrated effort, the subconscious mind receives it as a blueprint and begins, invisibly and without ceasing, to direct every act and every thought toward its materialization. This is not philosophy, it is law. It operates whether you believe in it or not, in the same way that the law of gravitation holds you to the earth whether or not you have studied physics. The man who understands it and applies it with deliberateness moves through the world with a force that the drifter can never comprehend. I must tell you, at this early point in our week together, what a definite chief aim is, and more importantly, what it is not. A definite chief aim is not a vague desire. I want to do better is not an aim. I wish I had more money is not an aim. I hope things improve is not an aim. These are wishes, and wishes, I have observed across thousands of men, are nothing more than the coward's substitute for commitment. A definite chief aim is precise. It names the thing you intend to accomplish. It states the method by which you intend to accomplish it. It carries within it a date, a reasonable, serious date by which you intend to have the thing in your possession. And it is committed to paper, where it may be seen and read and held in the mind with daily repetition, until the subconscious mind receives it not as a vague hope, but as an instruction. There is a psychological as well as a practical reason for the written aim. Any definite chief aim that is deliberately fixed in the mind and held there with the determination to realize it saturates the subconscious mind until it automatically influences the physical action of the body toward its attainment. The process is not mysterious when you understand it. It is the most natural thing in the world. The mind moves toward whatever dominates it. Give it a clear target, and it will organize every faculty you possess: imagination, initiative, enthusiasm, persistence around that target. Give it nothing, and it will organize itself around the nearest comfortable distraction. Day one does not ask of you anything difficult in the physical sense. It asks of you something that is, for most men, the most frightening act of their adult lives, the act of sitting down in silence, with paper and pen, and writing out honestly, precisely, without hedging, the single most important thing they intend to accomplish. Not what they wish would happen, not what seems reasonable given current circumstances. What they intend, with the full force of their will, backed by the full machinery of the laws I am describing this week. Write it out. Read it aloud. Read it again tonight before you sleep, and again in the morning when you rise. Place it where it cannot be avoided. Let your eyes fall upon it throughout the day. And do not be surprised if, in the act of writing it, something in you that has been asleep for years begins, very quietly, to stir. You cannot build a great life upon a foundation of indecision. Before this week ends, Nature will demand to know which direction you intend to move, and she will answer you according to what she finds in your mind. Give her something definite. Give her something to work with. Part 2-day, 2-turn week wish into consuming desire. Now that you have written your aim, I must speak to you about the fuel that either drives a man toward his aim or leaves him stranded midway between where he began and where he intended to go. That fuel is not discipline alone. It is not good habits, though habits are essential. It is not willpower in the ordinary sense of that word. The fuel I speak of is desire, not the mild, intermittent desire that flares up on a Monday morning and is extinguished by Tuesday afternoon, but the burning, obsessive, all-consuming desire that makes sleep a reluctant interruption and makes every obstacle appear not as a wall, but as a door. Most men confuse wishing with desiring, and the confusion destroys them quietly over years. I want to tell you about a young man who had nothing, no money, no formal education worth speaking of, no connections among men of power or standing, no letter of introduction, no family name that would open any door, no resource of any conventional kind. What he had was a A single, fixed, burning thought that had taken root in his mind with the tenacity of an oak growing through solid stone.
Everything we talked about today only works if you use it. The free auto-suggestion sheet in the description gives you the exact steps. No guessing, no overwhelm. Download it now while it's fresh and start tonight. Watching is easy. Applying is what finally moves your life in the right direction. The choice is yours.
He wanted to go into business with the greatest inventor in the world. Now, understand what I am telling you. He did not want to work for this man. He did not want a position in this man's organization, a decent wage, a respectable title. He wanted to be his partner, his business associate, his equal in enterprise. And at the time this desire first appeared in his mind, the gulf between what he was and what he intended to become was so vast that any reasonable man looking on from the outside would have called the desire not merely ambitious, but absurd. He could not afford a railroad ticket to the common laboratory. So he did what a man does when his desire is stronger than his obstacles. He climbed aboard a freight train and rode it to the door. He presented himself at the laboratory, he who looked, by his own accounting, more like a tramp than a future business partner, and he announced that he had come to go into business with the inventor. The men in that laboratory laughed at him. They could not have been expected to do otherwise. What they saw before them was a young man in poor clothes with an impossible claim. What they did not see, what they lacked the eyes to see, was what was happening inside that young man's mind. He did not leave. He accepted whatever work was given to him, however small and unimportant that work may have seemed. He swept floors. He performed the tasks that no one else considered beneath them, because he had not yet arrived at a position to consider anything beneath him. He worked in the most menial capacity available to him, and while he worked, he held in his mind, with the constancy of a fixed star, one image: himself as the business associate of the man who employed him. 5 years passed. Not one ray of hope appeared. Not one promise of the thing he sought was held out to him. To every observer in that building, he was simply another young man doing simple work. In his own mind, he was already what he intended to become. He was the partner of that great inventor, not in legal fact, but in the dominating conviction of his thought. Then, one day, the inventor introduced to his salesman a new device, an office machine that his own staff had no enthusiasm for selling. They did not believe it could be sold without enormous effort, and so they did not try. This young man saw something they did not see. He saw his opportunity not dressed in the fine clothes of a grand occasion, but crawling in quietly, hidden in a machine that no one else wanted. He told the inventor he could sell it. He was given the chance. He sold it with such success that he was handed a contract to distribute and market it across the entire nation. The business alliance that was born from that contract lasted for decades. The young man's name was Edwin C. Barnes. The inventor whose laboratory he had entered on a freight train was Thomas A. Edison. What separated Barnes from every other man who wished to be associated with Edison? It was not talent. It was not timing. It was not luck, though some who look at the surface of the story will always call it that. It was the quality and the character of his desire. Barnes's desire was definite. He wanted one thing. Not a collection of vague ambitions, not a long list of things he might be content with. One thing. He wanted to be the business associate of Thomas A. Edison. And that desire was not a wish that flickered on and off according to his mood. It was a consuming, persistent, all-dominating force that occupied his conscious mind, and through daily repetition, was handed to his subconscious mind as an unambiguous instruction. He burned all bridges behind him. He left himself no possible path of retreat. He did not say, "I will try this for a while and see." He said, in the silence of his own mind, "I will accomplish this, or I will perish in the attempt." And it was that quality of desire, absolute, unretracting burning, that the subconscious mind received and acted upon and brought into material form. Now I ask you this question, and I ask you to answer it honestly, with the same courage that I am asking you to cultivate this week. Is the aim you wrote yesterday something you want or something you cannot live without? These are two different creatures. A thing you want requires favorable circumstances. It requires that life cooperate, that others assist, that obstacles be absent or manageable. You will pursue it when pursuing it is convenient. You will set it aside when setting it aside is comfortable. And you will, most likely, arrive at the end of your years, with it still somewhere in the distance, approached but never reached. A thing you cannot live without makes its own circumstances. It does not require that the obstacles be absent. It requires only that the man who desires it be present in full every single day. It outlasts comfort and outlasts discouragement and outlasts the opinions of men who do not share it and cannot understand it. Today, day 2, your work is this. Return to the aim you wrote yesterday. Hold it in your mind now, seriously, and ask yourself what price you are willing to pay for its attainment. Not in abstract terms, in specific terms. What will you give up? What will you endure? What ridicule, what inconvenience, what long stretches of invisible labor will you sustain without complaint and without retreat? Write your answers beneath your aim. Let the desire deepen as you write, until it is no longer a wish but a fire. A wish will not get out of bed early. A wish will not endure ridicule. Desire will. And it is desire, not circumstance, not connection, not the favor of fortune, that the law of achievement ultimately answers. Part 3, day 3, cut out the 6 ghosts. Face what is really holding you. We have, in these first 2 days, planted the seed of a definite aim and watered it with burning desire. Now, I must speak to you about the most dangerous force in the life of a man who means to accomplish something, a force that works not in the open, where it might be confronted and defeated, but in the shadows of the mind, where it operates for years without being named. I speak of fear. Not the useful instinctive alarm that warns a man of genuine physical danger. That form of fear has its place in nature's design, and I will not quarrel with it. I speak of the 6 ghosts, and I call them ghosts deliberately, because that is precisely what they are. Creations of uncontrolled imagination, possessing no substance, no power, no reality beyond what the mind that houses them grants. Yet these ghosts, over the course of a lifetime, destroy more fortunes, shatter more careers, silence more worthy ambitions, and extinguish more promising lives than all the economic panics and natural disasters in recorded history combined. The 6 ghosts are these: the fear of poverty, the fear of criticism, the fear of ill health, the fear of the loss of love, the fear of old age, and the fear of death. Every human being alive carries one or more of them. Most carry several. And most have carried them for so long that they no longer recognize the weight. I want to tell you about a man whose story no one tells, because the man who suffers from fear and loses because of it almost never becomes the subject of a story. He disappears. He fades. His failure is quiet, unremarkable, and invisible to those who study success, because what he lost can never be seen, only felt. This man had an idea. It was sound. It was workable. He had examined it from every angle that an intelligent man could examine it. Men whose opinion he trusted, men with knowledge of the field, told him the idea had genuine merit. He could see it clearly, the steps he would take, the plan he would execute, the result that would follow, and yet he did not move. He told himself he was refining the idea, improving upon it, waiting until he had thought it through more completely. He was, in his own private accounting of his behavior, being careful, being thorough, being wise. But there was a question he did not ask himself, did not dare ask himself, which was this: what am I really afraid of? And the answer, had he been honest enough to speak it, was this: he was afraid of what men would say if he tried and failed. He was afraid of the criticism that failure would bring, the smiles behind his back, the quiet satisfaction of those who had doubted him, the necessity of admitting in public what he could only barely admit in private. He was afraid of criticism. And the fear of criticism, which lives and operates most powerfully in the subconscious, where its presence is hardest to detect, paralyzed him as completely as if he had been chained to the floor. While he deliberated, another man who did not know him, had never spoken to him, and arrived at the same idea by an entirely different road moved. That second man filed his papers, organized his effort, built his enterprise, and grew rich. The first man lived the remainder of his life carrying the knowledge that fear, not incapacity, not lack of resources, not an absence of opportunity, but the ghost of criticism had stolen from him something that could never be returned. This is not an unusual story. This is the story of millions of men and women alive today, alive and capable and drifting, held in place not by the walls of their circumstances, but by the invisible chains of fears they have never named. The first step in mastering fear is not courage, exactly, at least not in the popular sense of that word. The first step is examination. A man cannot defeat what he cannot see. The six ghosts draw their power precisely from the darkness in which they reside. Drag them into the light, name them, examine them, write them down, and they begin immediately to lose their grip. Indecision is the seedling of fear, and indecision crystallizes into doubt, and doubt and fear blend together until they become a single paralyzing force that the man who harbors them can neither explain nor escape. The process is gradual, which is precisely why it is so dangerous. The man does not go to bed one night, a man of courage, and wake the next morning a coward. The erosion is slow. Year by year, the habit of hesitation hardens, and year by year the man finds it a little more difficult to act, a little more natural to wait, a little more reasonable to delay. This is the third day of your week, and today I ask of you a specific act. Write down in plain language, without softening it with polite words, the one fear that is most directly blocking the path toward the aim you wrote on day one. Not the fear you think sounds most reasonable to admit, the real one. The one that wakes you at 3 in the morning and follows you quietly through your working hours and whispers its poisonous counsel in the moments when you are closest to deciding to act. Write it down. Bring it into the open. Then write, directly beneath it, the worst realistic outcome if that fear were to come true. Not the imagined catastrophe, the realistic outcome. If you attempt the aim and fail publicly, what actually happens? If the criticism comes, what does it actually cost you? If the thing you dread occurs, what is the honest shape of your life in the aftermath? In most cases, in nearly all cases, in my long experience, the honest answer is, I would survive it. I would rebuild. I would learn from it things I could not learn otherwise. The ghost does not survive that examination. It cannot. It is made of imagination, not of fact. Hold it up to the clear light of honest scrutiny, and it will shrink before your eyes. Do not misunderstand me. I am not telling you that what follows will be easy, or that the fear will vanish at once and trouble you no more. I am telling you that the fear which you have named and examined has lost its most powerful weapon, the weapon of invisibility. And a fear that has lost the cover of darkness is a fear that can be fought. The ghost of fear will not leave your house until you light a candle. Today is the day you light it. Part 4 day. 4 make the decision. Burn every bridge. Yesterday, you named the ghost that has been running your life from the shadows. Today, I must speak to you about the act that brings all the preceding work to bear, the act that transforms a man from a spectator of his own potential into the author of his own story. Today we speak of decision. I have analyzed, across decades of study, the habits of more than 16,000 men and women. I have examined the records of men who failed and men who succeeded, men who began with nothing and arrived at great estates, and men who began with every advantage and arrived at nothing. And in all of that analysis, one distinction emerged with the regularity and the clarity of a natural law. Men who succeed reach decisions promptly and firmly. They decide quickly and change their minds slowly, if at all. Men who fail decide slowly, if they decide at all, and change their minds frequently and quickly. The world has the habit of making room for the man whose words and actions show that he knows where he is going, and it has the habit of stepping around or over the man who will not make up his mind. I want to tell you about a decision that was made in a room in Philadelphia. Not a large or handsome room, the occasion demanded secrecy. And secrecy does not often come with large and handsome rooms. The men in that room were not reckless men. They were men of property, of families, of established positions in the world. They had built their lives carefully and had much to lose. They had also determined that what was being done to them and their countrymen was a thing that could not be endured, and that someone, at some point, was going to have to stand up and say so in terms that could not be mistaken. They gathered, they argued, days passed. Some weighed the possible consequences with the paralysis that always accompanies the recognition of great risk. Old man Fear moved through that room as surely as he moves through any room where important decisions are being delayed, and then a man who had already, on a previous occasion, told the representative of the most powerful military force in the world to go to the Devil stood, and declared in a clear and firm voice that they had discussed this issue long enough, that the only course was before them, and that the question was not whether they would act, but why they had waited so long to act. The document that was finally placed before that assembly was not simply a declaration of political principles. It was a death warrant. Every man who put his name to it understood that if the cause they were declaring for failed, and it might fail, against the odds they faced, he would hang. They signed it anyway. 56 men wrote their names to that document, each staking his life on the decision to do so. And it was that decision, not the size of Washington's armies, not the wealth of the colonies, not any material advantage, that ensured the ultimate victory. Because a decision of that quality, made with that degree of courage and backed by that degree of faith, sends a vibration through every man who witnesses it, a vibration that recognizes no such thing as failure. The power that gave a nation its freedom is the same power that a man must use to give himself his freedom. Not the freedom of nations, the personal freedom that comes to the man who has decided, finally and without reservation, what he is for and what he is about. Indecision is a habit. This is the most important thing I can tell you about it. It is not a temperament. It is not an inevitable feature of a man's character. It is a habit formed in youth, reinforced by a world that rarely demands decisiveness, and hardened through the law I have described into a permanent posture of paralysis. And habits, by their very nature, can be broken and replaced. There is a decision that you have been postponing. You know the one I mean. I do not need to tell you what it is. It has been with you, in the back of your mind, for weeks or months or possibly years. You have rehearsed it. You have examined it from every side. You have gathered more information about it than additional information could possibly improve. The information is not lacking. The will has simply not yet been fully engaged. Today, day 4, you engage it, not tomorrow. Not at the end of the week, after you have finished reviewing the remaining days of this philosophy and feel more prepared. The man who waits until he feels prepared to act will wait forever. Preparation is a virtue. Endless preparation is the drifter's most elegant disguise. Today, name the decision. Write it down. Tell one person whose respect you value and whose word you can rely upon what you have decided, and ask them to hold you to it. Take one physical action in the direction of your decision before this day ends. Not a large action, a beginning, a single step. The first step. The men in that room in Philadelphia did not spend a decade preparing to sign their names. They signed them, and then the work began. Decision without action is a promise to no one. But action taken the same hour, a decision is made that is the thing that changes a man's direction. That is the thing that changes a man's life. Part 5 day, 5 you cannot win alone. Build your mastermind. There is a temptation, particularly among men of strong character and independent spirit, to believe that the path to great achievement is a solitary one, that the man who accomplishes something truly worthy accomplishes it through the force of his own mind, unaided, unassisted, answerable to no one. This belief is romantic. It is also wrong. I want to tell you about a man who left school when he was barely old enough to be considered a young man at all. His formal education was slight by the measures of his time. He had worked with his hands in mills and factories. There was nothing in his background that the educated men of his era would have considered a preparation for the kind of enterprise he intended to build. Yet this man, in the course of his lifetime, built the most successful manufacturing enterprise the world of his era had seen. He accumulated a personal fortune that made him, by the accounting of his time, among the wealthiest men in the world. And he did all of this while, by his own cheerful admission, knowing almost nothing about the technical operations of the business he was in. A lawyer once tried to humiliate him in a courtroom by asking him a series of technical questions about the industry questions designed to expose his ignorance before the public and before the court. The questions came, one after another, and the man answered them all not by demonstrating the technical knowledge the lawyer was demanding, but by finally leaning forward, fixing the lawyer with a steady eye, and saying something very close to this: "If I should really want to answer any of these foolish questions, I have a row of electric buttons on my desk. By pressing the right button, I can summon men who can answer any question I desire to ask concerning the business to which I am devoting my efforts. Now, will you tell me why I should clutter up my mind with general knowledge when I have men around me who can supply any knowledge I require?" The courtroom understood that this was not the answer of an ignorant man. It was the answer of a man who understood something about the organization of knowledge and the organization of minds that the lawyer, for all his education, had not yet grasped. That man was Henry Ford. And the principle he was describing, without naming it, without formal instruction in it, was the principle of the master mind. The master mind is not a mystical concept. It is not poetry. It is the most practical organizational principle I have ever studied, and it is the foundation upon which nearly every great fortune and every great accomplishment I have examined was built. Whether the man who built it recognized the principle by that name or not, it is this: no individual mind possesses all the knowledge, all the energy, all the experience, all the imagination, and all the capacity required for great achievement. No single man, however brilliant, however disciplined, however burning with desire, can bring to bear upon a great problem all the resources that problem demands. But when two or more minds are brought into voluntary alliance, coordinated in a spirit of harmony and directed toward a definite common purpose, something occurs that transcends the simple addition of those minds. A third mind is created, a group mind. And the power of that group mind exceeds, in ways that can be felt but not easily calculated, the sum of its parts. Andrew Carnegie understood this more clearly than perhaps any man of his era. He once described to me the source of his success in terms that have stayed with me ever since. He said that no single mind in his organization, including his own, was the source of the power that had built his fortune. It was the sum total of the minds in his group, coordinated, organized, and directed to a definite end in a spirit of harmonious cooperation. Carnegie knew nothing of the technical details of the steel business. He did not particularly care to know them. What he knew was something far more valuable: how to identify men who possessed the knowledge he needed, how to bring those men together in harmony, and how to direct the collective energy of their coordinated minds toward the attainment of a definite aim. It was not his technical knowledge that built the Carnegie Empire. It was his understanding of the law of the master mind. And here is what I must tell you about the environment in which this principle operates, because environment is inseparable from the mastermind principle, and the man who ignores it does so at enormous cost. Every mind in your daily association is influencing your mind. This is not a theory. It is a fact of nature. The thought habits of the men and women with whom you spend the most time are absorbed by your mind, consciously and unconsciously, in the same way that the atmosphere of any room is breathed by all who inhabit it. The man who keeps company with those who speak of failure, who expect nothing, who treat ambition with suspicion and success with envy, that man is breathing poisoned air, and the effects are as real as any other poison, even when they are invisible. The men who build great enterprises insist, without exception, on harmony among their close associates. Not the false harmony of men who have surrendered their opinions, but the genuine harmony of minds working in the same direction, energized by the same purpose, pulling on the same rope. Today is day 5. And today I ask you to do this. Think carefully about the 5 men and women whose voices you hear most often, whose influence enters your daily environment most consistently. Are these voices building your aim or diminishing it? Are these minds pulling in the direction of your definite chief aim, or are they the voices of drift? I am not asking you to be cold or ungrateful toward those who have cared for you, but I am telling you, as plainly as I know how, that the company you keep is not an incidental feature of your life. It is one of the primary forces that shapes the direction your life will take. Identify 2 or 3 men or women whose character, whose aims, and whose manner of thinking are in alignment with the direction you have chosen. Seek an honest conversation with at least one of them today. Tell them what you are working toward. Invite their counsel. Begin the construction of a mastermind. The lone wolf is a romantic figure, but he is rarely a successful one, not in any undertaking that requires more than one man's supply of knowledge, energy, and imagination. And the aim you have written this week almost certainly requires more than that. Part 6 day, 6 go, the extra mile. Do what you have not been paid to do. I have been asked, across many years of describing this philosophy to men and women of every station and occupation, what single habit most reliably distinguishes the man who advances from the man who does not. I have given the question more thought than most questions deserve, because it is among the most important questions a man can ask. And the answer is always the same: not brilliance, not eloquence, not a pleasant appearance or a prominent family. The habit that most reliably and most consistently lifts a man above his present station is the habit of rendering more and better service than he is paid to render. I call this the law of increasing returns, and it operates with the same fidelity as any law in nature. The man who consistently does more than is asked of him, who goes beyond the boundary of his immediate obligation, who performs with enthusiasm and thoroughness the work that others merely perform, that man becomes, in time, indispensable. And an indispensable man is a man who cannot easily be removed, overlooked, or underpaid. The law sees to that. Not through sentiment, but through the iron logic of value. I want to tell you about a young woman who worked in my employ. She came to me as an ordinary stenographer doing work that a dozen other young women were doing at a salary that was standard for the service she was providing. There was nothing in her circumstances at that moment to distinguish her from any other woman in a similar position. One day I gave her a motto to transcribe, a motto I had written and wanted to see on paper. Your only limitation is the one you set up in your own mind. She handed the transcribed page back to me and said, quietly but firmly, your motto has given me an idea that is going to be of value to both you and me. I thought nothing of it at the time. Men in positions of responsibility receive a great many remarks every day, and most of them vanish from the memory before the conversation is over. I told her I was glad to be of service, and the matter left my mind entirely. But it had not left hers. From that day forward, I began to notice something. She was returning to the office in the evenings on her own time, unasked, without additional compensation, and performing work she had not been employed to perform. She had studied my methods and my manner of correspondence until she could draft letters in my name as well as I could myself, in some cases better. She kept this habit steadily, without announcement or complaint, until the day my personal secretary resigned. I began to look for someone to take that position. What was more natural than to turn to this young woman? Before I had even formed the decision to offer her the place, she had taken it. My personal mail began to arrive at my desk with a new name on the correspondence, and she was that secretary. On her own time, without instruction, without additional pay, she had prepared herself for the best position on my staff. She had not waited for an opportunity. She had built the door, hung it herself, and opened it from the inside. I will add this. She became so noticeably capable that other men came to me offering to engage her at salaries that made my initial offer look modest. I increased her salary many times. She received, by the end of our association, more than 4 times what she had received when she began. And the truth is that by that time I was, in a very real sense, in her debt, because she had made herself so valuable to my work that I could not easily have replaced her. That is, the law of increasing returns in practical terms, not theory, not sentiment. Law. I want to be precise about what this law demands, because a man can misread it and conclude that what I am describing is simply working longer hours. And that is not it exactly. The formula I have spent my life studying is this: quality of service, quantity of service, and the spirit in which that service is rendered. I call it the QQS formula, and I have never found a successful man who did not, consciously or not, apply it. Quality means that every detail of the work you do is performed in the most efficient and thorough manner you know, and that you are always looking for ways to perform it better. Quantity means that you render all the service of which you are capable at all times with the purpose of increasing that service as your skill develops. You do not hold back. You do not calibrate your effort to the minimum the situation requires. And spirit, this is the one that most men overlook, and it is the one that the law weighs most heavily. Spirit means the attitude with which the work is done. Work done grudgingly or mechanically or with the sullenness of a man who resents his circumstances is work that repels rather than attracts. Work done with genuine enthusiasm, with the spirit of a man who is playing a great game, rather than enduring a necessary sentence, that work sends a signal into the world that is received by other men and received favorably. Today, day 6, I ask you to perform one act of service that no one has asked for, that no one is watching, and that no one will reward immediately. Do it in the direction of your definite chief aim, if possible. Do it thoroughly. Do it with enthusiasm. And then, before you sleep tonight, notice what it has done to your estimation of yourself. Notice what it has done to the quiet confidence with which you regard your own capacity. The man who does more than he is paid for today will always be paid more than the man who does only what he must. This is not a moral sentiment. It is arithmetic. Part 7 day 7 repeat. Persist. Let the law of cosmic habit force do the rest. We arrive now at the 7th day, and this 7th day is both the end of the week and the beginning of the life. What I am about to describe to you is the force that underlies all the other forces we have examined this week. It is the law that either works for you or works against you, that hardens your habits into permanent strength or hardens your neglect into permanent weakness, and that does so with a fidelity and a patience that no human effort can alter or escape. Nature observes what you repeat. This is the principle. Whatever thought you return to most frequently, whatever action you perform most consistently, whatever image you hold most steadily in your conscious mind, nature receives that signal through the operation of what I have called the law of cosmic habit force, makes it permanent. Not instantly, not loudly, but as certainly as the musician who repeats a melody until his fingers find it in the dark, nature fixes into permanent form whatever rhythm a man has established in his mind and in his habits. This is why the drifter's condition is so dangerous. Not because drift is immediately catastrophic, it rarely is, but because drift, left undisturbed, hardens over time into a permanent rhythm of aimlessness, and once that rhythm is established at a sufficient depth, the man who inhabits it can no more escape it by wishing than a whirlpool can be escaped by an object already caught in its current. And this is also why the work of the past 6 days is so powerful, not because any one day changes a man, but because the 7 days together have begun to establish a new rhythm, a rhythm of definiteness, a rhythm of desire, a rhythm of courage and decision and service. And the law of cosmic habit force will harden this rhythm just as faithfully as it would harden any other, provided you do not stop. I must tell you a story now that is more personal to me than any other I have told this week. I tell it not for the purpose of self-display, but because there is no illustration in all my years of study that demonstrates the power of this principle more directly or more undeniably. There was a child born to me who came into the world in a condition that the physicians who attended at his birth regarded as permanent and irreversible. He was born without the physical equipment for hearing. The doctor told me privately, on the day of his birth, that the child might never hear or speak, I heard those words. And then, silently, in the secrecy of my own mind, I reached a decision. I decided that my son would hear and speak, not as a wish, not as a hope, as a decision from which I would not retreat. I could not explain at that time how this result would be achieved. I did not have a plan in the conventional sense. What I had was a conviction, an unretracted, unrelinquishing conviction that if the desire for a thing is held in the mind with sufficient force and backed with sufficient faith, nature will find means of its own devising to bring that thing into reality. For years, I planted in that child's mind, through bedtime stories, through repeated suggestion, through the daily investment of a father's faith, the belief that his affliction was not a liability, but an asset. I told him over and over, in ways fitted to his age and his understanding, that his particular condition would one day become a source of great power and great service. I did not know how. I believed it. Years passed. He went through school, not a school for the deaf, but a school for ordinary children, among ordinary children, because I would not permit him to define himself by his limitation. He could hear some things slightly. He developed means of his own small discoveries, self-taught, that brought more sound to him than his condition seemed to allow. Then, in the final weeks of his time at college, 18 years after his birth, he came into possession of a new hearing device and placed it upon his head and connected the battery. And for the first time in his life, he heard clearly, heard fully, heard the voices of the professors in his classroom, heard the voice of his mother on the telephone, heard the world as other men heard it. He rushed to the telephone. He called his mother. He heard her voice for the first time. I will not pretend to fully explain what occurred in that child's development, because I cannot fully explain it. The specialists who examined him could not fully explain it, either one of them stating that by every medical measure, the boy should not have been able to hear at all. But he heard. Because his father who had planted desire in his mind with the same method by which a farmer plants seed in fertile soil and tended it with daily repetition across 2 decades, his father had refused, from the first moment, to accept the verdict of limitations. That son's name is Blair Hill, and his father, who refused to accept what the world called impossible, was the man speaking to you now. I tell you this not to boast. I tell you this because it is the most direct evidence I possess that the principles I am describing are not ornamental. They are not comfortable words arranged to make a man feel better about his circumstances for an hour. They are laws that respond to application with the same reliability that fire responds to kindling, regardless of whether the man who applies them fully understands why they work. Autosuggestion, the principle by which repeated thoughts, emotionalized and held with faith, are transferred from the conscious mind to the subconscious, is the mechanism by which this law is applied. It is the tool. The subconscious mind is the garden, and what is planted in that garden and tended with daily repetition grows. Most men understand this principle in reverse. They plant fear by repeating fearful thoughts. They plant self-doubt by rehearsing their failures in their minds. They plant the poverty consciousness by focusing day after day on what they lack rather than on what they intend to acquire. And then they are astonished when their harvest corresponds to what they planted. The man who intends to use this law to his benefit must reverse the process deliberately, must choose with care what he plants, and must tend that planting with daily repetition, with genuine feeling, and with the faith that what is planted will in time produce its counterpart in the material world. Today, day 7, I ask you to do the following. Return to the paper on which you wrote your definite chief aim on day 1. Read it aloud now, in this moment. Read it aloud this evening. Read it aloud tomorrow morning. Read it at every opportunity you can create across the coming weeks, until the words have moved from the page into the permanent structure of your mind. Beneath your aim, write these words: I shall persist, without deviation, without retreat, and without apology, until this aim becomes my physical reality. Sign your name to it. Date it. This is not theater. This is the act by which you hand an instruction to the deepest and most powerful part of your mind, the part that does not distinguish between the possible and the impossible, but concerns itself only with the instruction it has received and the faithful execution of that instruction. The 7 days are not complete when this one ends. They are complete when the 7 habits are installed, when the man who began this week as a drifter has taken his first 7 steps as a man of definite purpose and has committed to repeating those steps until the law of cosmic habit force makes them the permanent rhythm of his life. Closing monologue. The demand. Let me return now to the man with whom I began this week, the man who lost everything in a night, who sat in the ruins of what had been his life and found, beneath the noise of everything that had been stripped away, a question he had never before thought to ask with complete seriousness. What am I actually for? That man's story is not remarkable because of the disaster that befell him. Disasters befall men constantly: the panic of a market, the failure of a partnership, the sudden reversal of fortune that no amount of caution can fully prevent. What is remarkable is what that man did with the week that followed his disaster. He did not spend it in mourning, though mourning would have been understandable. He did not spend it assigning blame, though blame was available. He spent it asking and answering the question that most men spend a lifetime carefully avoiding, and the answer, arrived at through honest examination in conditions that stripped away every comfortable illusion, redirected the entire remaining arc of his existence. That man was not a special man. He was a man who, at a moment of maximum clarity, used the law of definite purpose with maximum seriousness. The result was not miraculous. It was the natural and inevitable consequence of the law operating as it always operates, answering definiteness with direction, answering decision with power, answering persistence with accomplishment. The 6 ghosts I described on day 3 will return. I will not deceive you on this point. They always return: fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of failure, fear of what others will say. They return because they are ancient and because they are patient, and because most men have given them a comfortable room in the house of their minds for so long that the rooms feel familiar even when they are painful. The question is not whether the ghosts return. The question is whether the man they return to has changed. After 6 days of deliberate, purposeful work, after naming an aim, deepening a desire, exposing and naming a fear, making and acting upon a decision, building an alliance, going the extra mile, after all of that, the man who opens the door to those returning ghosts is a different man than the one who let them in before. He has light now, and the ghost that was invisible in the dark can be seen in the light, and the ghost that can be seen can be confronted. And the ghost that can be confronted has already lost most of its power. I will tell you what this week is not. It is not a guarantee. No honest teacher offers guarantees, and any man who promises you results without requiring from you the effort and the persistence and the courage that results demand is a charlatan, and you should treat him accordingly. What this week is what these 7 days can be, if you use them with the seriousness they deserve, is a beginning, a new rhythm, the first 7 notes of a new song that, if repeated daily, will in time become the permanent music of your mind. The law of hypnotic rhythm is running. It is running this week. It is running at this moment as you receive these words. It is making permanent whatever is in your mind, whatever you repeat, whatever you dwell upon, whatever vibration dominates your thought. Nature does not wait for your permission. She does not pause while you gather your resolve or consult your comfort. She is setting the rhythm now. The only question remaining, the only question that has ever been relevant is this: are you going to choose the rhythm? Or are you going to let drift choose it for you, as drift has been choosing it, quietly and without ceremony, for however many years you have been walking through this life without a definite aim? This is not the week to watch and wait. This is not the week to file the knowledge away for future reference and return to your ordinary habits. The laws I have described this week do not improve with storage. They improve only with application, immediate, concrete, repeated application. Write the aim, deepen the desire, name the fear, make the decision today, find your allies, do more than you have been paid to do. And then repeat these things. Repeat them until the law of cosmic habit force takes them from your intention and makes them the permanent nature of your character. You came to this material